Have you ever walked away from a conversation feeling confused, unsettled, or unsure of what just happened? Maybe you replayed the words in your mind and thought to yourself, "Why do I feel wrong, even though I tried to do everything right?" Maybe you felt guilty for expressing your feelings, or maybe you felt responsible for someone else's emotions, even when you knew you should not be. Emotional manipulation often begins in these quiet moments. Moments where something feels off, but you cannot quite explain it. It does not start with shouting or dramatic scenes. Sometimes it sounds calm. Sometimes it sounds gentle. Sometimes it even sounds like love. But the effect is the same. You begin to doubt yourself. You begin to question your own reactions. You begin to wonder, am I overreacting? Am I too sensitive? Did I cause this? Emotional manipulation works slowly. It shifts the way you see yourself. It makes you trust someone else's interpretation of reality more than your own. And it leaves you feeling unsteady, like you are losing your balance emotionally, even though nothing looks wrong from the outside. So let me ask you a few quiet questions. Have you ever started apologizing even when you did nothing wrong? Have you ever felt like your feelings were dismissed or minimized? Have you ever been told you misunderstood something, even when you were sure you heard it clearly? Have you ever felt pressured to keep peace at any cost, just so the other person would not get upset? Have you ever noticed that after certain conversations, you feel smaller, weaker, or more unsure of yourself? If you have ever felt these things, you might have experienced emotional manipulation, even if you did not have a name for it before. And you are not alone. Many people experience this without realizing what is happening until they step back and finally hear their own voice again. Emotional manipulation is not always loud or dramatic. It is not always obvious. At its core, emotional manipulation is about control. It is when someone tries to influence your thoughts, your feelings, or your actions by using your emotions against you. Instead of communicating openly or honestly, they push you in a direction that benefits them, not you. They want you to react in certain ways, to feel certain things, to question yourself in ways that weaken your confidence. Emotional manipulation takes away your ability to think clearly. It clouds your judgment. It makes you second-guess your own instincts. You start trusting their version of events more than your own memories. You start doubting your reactions. You may even start believing that you are the problem. And this is exactly what a manipulator wants. A manipulator studies you carefully. They notice what makes you insecure. They notice what makes you feel guilty. They notice what you fear, what you hope for, and what you are sensitive about. Then they use all of that to shape your emotions. If guilt works, they use guilt. If fear works, they use fear. If praise and affection work, they use charm. The goal is always the same: to guide your emotions in a way that gives them more control. When you begin to rely on their reactions, their approval, or their interpretation of events, they become the center of your emotional world. And once that happens, they can push, pull, or pressure you in almost any direction. Emotional manipulation is not simply someone expressing their feelings. It is not someone having a bad day or saying the wrong thing. It is a pattern of behavior designed to influence you without your full awareness. It slowly takes away your ability to think for yourself, and it replaces your inner voice with theirs. Understanding this definition is the first step toward recognizing the tactics that manipulators use. Because once you know what emotional manipulation truly is, you can start seeing how it shows up in your relationships and how it affects the way you feel about yourself. Emotional manipulation does not usually happen with strangers. It happens with the people closest to you: partners, family members, friends, or even co-workers, people who have access to your emotions and your daily life. The reason is simple. Manipulation works best where there is trust. When someone is close to you, they know your habits, they know your fears, they know your insecurities, your dreams, and the things you care deeply about. And because of that, they have more influence over how you feel. In a relationship, you naturally want to understand your partner. You want to make the relationship work. You want to keep peace. That makes you more open, more vulnerable, and more willing to compromise. A manipulative person takes advantage of that openness. They use the closeness to shape your emotions in a way that benefits them. Family members can do the same. They may rely on guilt, expectations, or old patterns that you learned growing up. If you were raised to keep the peace, or to put others first, or to avoid conflict, you can become an easy target for emotional manipulation inside the family system. Friends can also manipulate, sometimes subtly, sometimes directly. Because you trust them, you may not question their intentions. You may give them the benefit of the doubt, even when they cross your boundaries. And then there is the workplace. A boss or co-worker may use pressure, guilt, charm, or fear to control your actions. They depend on the fact that you want to keep your job, maintain stability, or avoid conflict. In all these situations, the common factor is proximity. The closer someone is to your daily life, the easier it is for them to influence your emotions. Because closeness creates trust, and trust creates vulnerability. Emotional manipulation often grows in environments where you feel responsible for the other person's feelings, or where you want to avoid upsetting them, or where you believe that their approval matters. Understanding this helps you see that manipulation is not about weakness. It is not about being naive. It is simply about being human. When we care about people, we are more affected by how they treat us. And that is exactly why manipulation in close relationships can be so powerful and so painful. Manipulators are not always loud or aggressive. In fact, many of them are emotionally intelligent. They can read people very well. They notice small details, body language, tone shifts, and emotional cues. But instead of using this emotional intelligence to connect with you or understand you, they use it to control you. They study what makes you uncomfortable. They notice what makes you insecure. They test which buttons create the strongest reactions. And once they find those weak points, they begin to target them. For example, if they see that you fear disappointing others, they will use guilt. If they see that you question your worth, they will use criticism or comparisons. If they see that you hate conflict, they will raise their voice or create tension so you back down quickly. If they see that you crave reassurance, they will give affection in small doses, only to pull it away when they want something. This is not an accident. It is a pattern. A manipulator uses your insecurities to create emotional dependency. They want you to rely on them. They want your peace to depend on their approval. They want you to think that only they understand you, or only they can make the situation better. And when you start believing that, you slowly lose trust in yourself. Your self-esteem weakens. Your boundaries soften. You begin to question your own perceptions. You begin to feel grateful for small moments of kindness because everything else feels unstable. This is how dependency forms, not through physical control, but through emotional pressure. They give you just enough warmth to keep you close, and just enough confusion to keep you unsteady. When someone can read your emotions, but chooses to use that sensitivity as a weapon, it becomes a powerful form of psychological manipulation. They shape your world in a way that benefits them, and as long as you doubt yourself, they remain in control. Understanding this psychology is important because it helps you see that emotional manipulation is not random. It is intentional, it is strategic, and it operates in the spaces where your heart is open. Emotional manipulation shows up in many different ways, and the signs can be subtle at first. One of the most common behaviors is guilt tripping. The manipulator knows that guilt is a powerful emotion. They make you feel responsible for their mood, their choices, or their discomfort. If you express a need, they make you feel selfish. If you bring up something that hurt you, they remind you of everything they have done for you. The message is simple. You owe them. Another common behavior is planting self-doubt. A manipulator will repeatedly question your memory, your decisions, or your ability to understand a situation. They might say things like, "I never said that. You misunderstood me. You always get confused." Over time, these small statements make you question your own clarity. Complaining is also used as a form of control. A manipulator may act overwhelmed, irritated, or stressed so that you feel pressured to fix things for them. They depend on your desire to keep peace, so their discomfort becomes your responsibility. Comparisons are another tool. They point out someone who does things better, reacts better, or behaves better. They say things like, "Look how patient she is. Look how supportive he is. Why are you not like that?" This is not inspiration. It is designed to make you feel inadequate. Then there is charm. Not all manipulation feels negative. Some manipulators use love bombing. They shower you with attention, affection, and praise when they want something from you. They make you feel special for a moment. But this charm disappears the second you set a boundary or say no. And finally, there are ultimatums. When charm and guilt do not work, some manipulators turn to pressure. They say things like, "If you do not do this, I am leaving. If you do not agree, I cannot stay with you. If you do not change, I am done." Ultimatums create fear, and fear creates compliance. These behaviors may look different from each other, but they all come from the same intention: to control how you feel, to influence your decisions, and to create a dynamic where your emotions revolve around theirs. Recognizing these patterns is the first step toward breaking the cycle. Manipulation is not always direct. It often appears through subtle tactics that slowly shift the balance of power in a relationship. One common tactic is location advantage. A manipulator may insist on meeting or talking in places where they feel comfortable and in control. Their home, their office, their territory. When you are on their turf, you are naturally more careful and less confident, and that gives them an advantage. Another tactic is twisting facts. They take parts of the truth, leave out important details, or change the order of events so the story benefits them. They make excuses. They blame you. They rewrite situations. And because they speak confidently, you may begin to question your own memory. Exaggeration is also common. They say things like, "You always do this. You never listen. Nobody agrees with you." These big statements make you feel overwhelmed and defensive, even when they are not true. Cruel humor is another strategy. They joke about your insecurities, your mistakes, your body, your fears. And if you confront them, they say, "Relax. It was just a joke." But it was never a joke. It was a message disguised as humor. Then there is gaslighting, one of the most damaging forms of manipulation. They deny things that happened. They claim they never said what you heard clearly. They say you imagined things. They make you question your own reality until you start trusting their words more than your own mind. Passive aggression is another tactic. Instead of saying they are upset, they show it through silence, attitude, or small sabotaging behaviors. They may do things slowly, make mistakes on purpose, or shut down emotionally to punish you for not giving them what they want. Social or emotional bullying also appears in manipulation. This can be constant criticism, raised voices, intimidation, or creating an environment where you feel small or unworthy. They may spread rumors, isolate you from others, or make you believe no one else understands you. Distortion is similar. They twist your words. They take what you said and turn it into something completely different. Suddenly, the conversation shifts, and now you are defending yourself against something you never even meant. Withdrawal is another tactic, the silent treatment, ignoring messages, acting cold. This creates anxiety in you and pushes you to chase after them, even when they are the one who caused the issue. Comparisons are used again and again. They point out people who in their eyes behave better, look better, or respond better than you. The goal is to create insecurity. When you feel insecure, you try harder to earn their approval. Judging and criticism are also common. They comment on what you wear, how you speak, how you think, or the decisions you make. These comments slowly chip away at your confidence. A manipulator may also use your secrets against you. They take the things you shared in moments of vulnerability and bring them up in arguments. They use your fears, your past, or your insecurities as weapons. They often return to guilt trips and ultimatums because these tactics create pressure. Statements like, "If you leave me, I will not survive. If you loved me, you would do this." These words are designed to trap you emotionally. And finally, one of the most dangerous tactics, appearing calm while provoking you. They say something hurtful with a calm voice. They stay composed while you naturally react. Then they point at your reaction and say, "See, you are the problem. You are overreacting. You are emotional." This tactic is meant to make you doubt your own feelings. These strategies work because they create confusion, guilt, dependency, and self-doubt. The more confused you feel, the more control they gain. And the more you doubt yourself, the easier it becomes for them to shape your emotions. Emotional manipulation works quietly, and that is what makes it so effective. It does not usually overwhelm you all at once. Instead, it confuses you slowly. At first, You notice small things, a comment that feels off, a disagreement that leaves you unsettled, a reaction from them that does not match what actually happened. These moments are small enough that you question yourself rather than the other person. This confusion is the foundation of manipulation. When you cannot clearly explain why you feel uncomfortable, you begin to wonder if maybe you are mistaken. Maybe you misunderstood. Maybe you are being too sensitive. That self-doubt is exactly what a manipulator counts on. If you cannot trust your own interpretation of events, then you become more likely to trust theirs. Over time, this confusion begins to distort your sense of reality. You start believing their version of situations instead of your own. When they tell you that something did not happen, or that your reaction was wrong, or that your feelings are exaggerated, you start to question your own memories. You stop relying on your instincts, and without noticing, you let them become the filter through which you understand what is true or false. This destroys self-trust. And once self-trust is weak, everything else becomes easier for the manipulator. You hesitate before speaking up. You hesitate before setting boundaries. You hesitate before expressing your needs. You begin to feel like your emotions need permission, or that your feelings must be approved by them before they matter. This is when boundaries quietly begin to disappear. At first, you bend a little. You give in to avoid conflict. You let things slide because you want peace. You tell yourself it is not a big deal. But each time you bend your boundaries, they lose strength. And each time the manipulator sees that you give in, they learn which tactics work on you. Eventually, you realize that you have accepted things you never thought you would tolerate. Not because you are weak, but because manipulation does not break you in one moment. It wears you down slowly. It shapes your behavior through confusion, guilt, pressure, and emotional imbalance. This is why emotional manipulation is so effective. It does not attack you directly. It quietly alters how you see yourself. It disconnects you from your own inner voice. And once you stop trusting yourself, it becomes much easier for someone else to lead you in the direction that benefits them, not you. There are certain signs that appear when emotional manipulation is happening in your life, and most of these signs show up in your behavior long before you recognize them. One of the clearest signs is people-pleasing. You find yourself trying harder and harder to keep the other person happy. You go out of your way to avoid upsetting them. You worry constantly about their reaction, and gradually, your own needs become less important than keeping the peace. Another sign is difficulty saying no. You hesitate to set boundaries because you know it will lead to tension, conflict, or guilt. You say yes, even when you feel uncomfortable. You agree to things that do not align with your values. You make sacrifices you should never have to make, simply because the cost of saying no feels too high. Questioning yourself is another powerful sign. You replay conversations in your mind. You wonder if you misinterpreted something. You doubt your feelings. You wonder if you caused the problem. You ask yourself, am I overreacting? Am I imagining things? Am I being too emotional? When someone makes you doubt your own reality, that is manipulation, not misunderstanding. Feeling responsible for their emotions is one more sign. You take on their stress, their sadness, their anger. You feel guilty when they are upset, even if their feelings have nothing to do with you. You try to fix things for them. You feel like it is your job to keep them calm, stable, and satisfied. But a healthy relationship is not one where you must carry another person's emotional world on your back. Setting boundaries is one of the most powerful ways to protect yourself from emotional manipulation. A boundary is simply a clear line that defines how you want to be treated. It is a statement that says, "This is what I am comfortable with. This is what I am not willing to accept." Boundaries are not about controlling someone else. They are about respecting yourself. Boundaries matter because manipulation works best when someone has full access to your emotions, your reactions, and your personal space. When you create limits, you take back control of your life. You stop allowing someone else to shape your feelings, and you begin to rebuild your self-trust. A simple boundary might sound like, "I am not available to talk right now," or "I will not continue this conversation if you raise your voice." Limiting contact is another form of boundary. If you do not need to see the manipulator often, you can choose to spend less time with them. Less time means fewer opportunities for them to influence your emotions, and more room for you to reconnect with yourself. Not oversharing is also important. The more personal information a manipulator has about you, the more they can use it against you. You do not need to explain every feeling, every detail, or every part of your life. Staying neutral is another effective strategy. Manipulators want emotional reactions. They thrive on drama, guilt, and intensity. When you respond calmly and briefly, without giving them the emotional response they expect, you take away their power. A simple, "I see," or "I am not discussing this right now," can create distance. This is a difficult question, and the honest answer is not the one most people want to hear. Can emotional manipulators change? Yes, they can, but most will not, and there is a very important reason for that. Emotional manipulation is rooted in a lack of accountability. It allows the manipulator to avoid responsibility for their actions. It protects their ego. It keeps them in control. And because these tactics work for them, they have very little motivation to stop using them. For someone to truly change, they must first recognize their behavior. They must be willing to say, "I am causing harm. I am manipulating. I am responsible for this pattern." But emotional manipulators rarely reach that level of self-reflection on their own. Admitting the truth means letting go of control. It means facing their insecurities instead of hiding behind manipulation. And for many, that is too uncomfortable. Change requires accountability. It requires humility. It requires emotional maturity. And these qualities are often missing in people who rely on manipulation to navigate relationships. Real change would look very different from temporary apologies or short periods of good behavior. It would mean taking full responsibility without shifting blame. It would mean listening without becoming defensive. It would mean respecting boundaries instead of pushing against them. It would mean choosing honesty over control. And it would mean consistently showing new behavior over a long period of time. Change is possible, but it is rare because it requires deep emotional work. Work that many manipulators avoid. Most will continue their patterns unless they face serious consequences or choose therapy. Some may improve slightly for short periods, but unless the roots of the behavior are addressed, the cycle often returns. Manipulation is not something you can fix in someone else. You cannot love them into changing. You cannot explain them into changing. You cannot sacrifice yourself into changing them. Real change must come from them, and they must want it more than they want control.